Good morning. If you have a Bible handy, turn with me to the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. We're going to start in chapter 1 of Nehemiah, verses 1 through 11. Let me say right at the outset that Nehemiah wears three hats in the Old Testament book that bears his name. He is a cupbearer, he is a wall builder, and he is governor. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the month of Kislev in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, the rules you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, and I will scatter you among the peoples, but if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name. Give ear to the success, or give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. No, I was cupbearer to the king. It's the month Kislev, our December, probably 445 BC. And you have here the marks of a competent leader, recognition of the need. In verse 3, he diagnoses the situation that he's listening to and realizes that there is great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is in disrepair. There's genuine concern. In verse 4, he sat down, wept, and mourned for days, continued fasting and praying before God. There's prayer. He explains exactly what the prayer is, and then there's personal investment. He says, give success to your servant today, grant him mercy in the sight of this man. And this man would be none other than the king of Persia, the most powerful man on earth, to whom Nehemiah served as cupbearer. The opportune time came 4 months later. 4 months. He had to patiently wait. Nehemiah made the request, and when the king finally questioned him, he was ready. The king noticed that his countenance was sad, and he basically says, how can I not be down when my people back in Jerusalem are suffering in this way? Then the king said to me, chapter 2, verse 4, what are you requesting? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's grave, so that I may rebuild it. And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will you be gone, and when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors and provinces beyond the river, that they might let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates and fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I requested, for the good hand of my God was upon me. So you have Nehemiah ready for what the king would ask. He prays a prayer, possibly right there on the spot, maybe a silent prayer, and then answers the king's request for specific details. And you have a definite time, a definite plan of action. There's a need for passport papers and requisition forms for building materials. Nehemiah had already done his homework, and the king granted him permission. Charles Swindoll has said, faith is not a synonym for disorder or a substitute for careful planning. Nehemiah was praying all this time, but he was also planning. He made very specific plans, and he was ready to give an answer. The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Proverbs 21, verse 1. And so Nehemiah outlines the task at hand. Verse 11, so I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. I went out by night to the valley gate, to the dragon spring, to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down, and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall, and I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, and I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. So the first order of business when Nehemiah gets to Jerusalem is to do more homework, to formulate another plan of action. There was a need for evaluation, for inspection before the reconstruction could occur. He enlists the support of leading men. There is no way he can single-handedly pull this off all by himself. He needs their support, their involvement. And you notice the terms in verse 17, we, us, we. I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. He also emphasizes the desperation of the need before he lays out the solution. And they come on board. Verse 18, and I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. Some of the most famous words of Nehemiah, and the title for the sermon this morning. Let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. The stage is set. The work begins. But here is where the leadership of Nehemiah really shines. When you're undertaking a task like this, it's just a straight line, total success without any obstacles, right? Wrong. There's one obstacle right after another. Would they be able to complete the task? You have all of these obstacles. What are they? First, you have direct criticism. It never fails. Murphy's Law. It won't work. Won't work. Those who walk by faith will always reap the hostility of people who do not share the same vision. When you experience criticism or opposition, it doesn't necessarily mean you are outside of God's will. It might mean that you're right on target. In chapter 2, verse 10, but when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. And then you read in verse 19, but when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, "What is this thing you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" Jesus would say years later, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for in the same way their fathers used to treat the false prophets." Luke 6:26. And Nehemiah answered this direct criticism, this mockery, with a simple statement in verse 20. Then I replied to them, "The God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem." In other words, Nehemiah's answer is the God of heaven will cause us to succeed, and this is none of your business. Check off the first problem. And they get to work. And it's this huge, huge project. And people are excited for the most part. Whenever you're generating enthusiasm for a project this big, you'll have a lot of enthusiasm along with some pockets of discontent. Human nature 101. And so internal apathy is the second major hurdle. In chapter 3 and verse 5, as Nehemiah outlines different groups of people who have different locations along the outer perimeter wall where they're building. For instance, in verse 3, the sons of Hassenaah built the fish gate. They laid its beams, set its doors, its bolts, its bars. Next to them, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired. Next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, and so on and so forth. But then you get to verse 5. And next to them, the Tekoites repaired, but their nobles would not stoop to serve the Lord. Or some translations say their nobles would not support the work. Tekoa was where Amos was from. He was a herdsman of Tekoa. Do you remember that? Close to Jerusalem. And here you have all this enthusiasm, 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 and here you have people just, well, if you want to do that, that's fine. But, I'm not going to bend a finger to help. Now, what sometimes happens when you have a group of people like that spoiling all the others' enthusiasm is those cranky, do-nothing people will get all the attention. Have you ever noticed that when you got a giant project and everybody's enthused about it, but these grumpy people over here, then they'll get all the attention, and it'll be a major distraction. You try to pacify them and try. to get them on board with it. And what do they do for these Tekoites? What is said in the text about dealing with their issues? Some people are not team players. They're not going to sacrifice like everyone else. Even when you have delegation of labor and the workers' stations, this little tidbit is mentioned. What kind of attention does this receive? And the answer is it doesn't receive any attention. And the silence of Nehemiah on that point speaks volumes. I don't know how they dealt with this exactly. Nothing more is said. But I would suggest to you the very fact that nothing more is said may in and of itself speak volumes. These less than dedicated Tekoites were not going to be coddled, and they were not going to get the attention necessary to slow the whole project down. Fine, we're doing this job. And we'll just make passing mention in that in the Bible for millions of people to read for all posterity that you didn't support this. But we're not going to let you slow us down. Oh, and then the external mockery became more intense. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. Now, when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yes, what they are building. If a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." It's the ancient counterpart to the three little pigs, I guess. Fox is going to take care of this. Break it down. So the critics turn up their heat. Critics run with critics. Some critics are furious at the success of others. You notice how they call it their wall? From a human perspective, it's their wall. What does Nehemiah do with that? We're being criticized. Should we stop the project and deal with these critics? No. How is this problem handled? Nehemiah faces the mockery squarely. Verses 4 and 5, he says, "Hear our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads, and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders." He realized that what these critics were doing was not constructive, that it was devilish, and he immediately took the matter to God. And verse 6 says, "So we built the wall. And the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work." That's one of the keys to the entire book. Keep mixing the mortar. Hand me another brick. As criticism intensifies, prayer and persistence intensify. But you keep going and you don't pay attention to the critics. But then you have something internal again. Seems like you go external, internal, external, internal. Now we go back to the internal problems. Verses 10 and 11 of chapter 4, "In Judah it was said, The strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves, we will not be able to rebuild the wall. And our enemies said they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. So the reasons or causes behind the discouragement, you have a loss of strength. What's exciting at first, all of a sudden becomes hard work. One time when I was in college, I did a one-day job. It was a couple-hour job, actually, taking 90-pound bags of concrete off of the back of a truck and loading them into a shed. And at first, it was fun, you know. And then after a while, those bags got heavy. I mean, really heavy. Um, I think there were 500 of those bags. And so there were three of us. And so after you carry about 100 of those, 90-pound bag gets really heavy. And this work was exciting at first, but after a while, then it turned to we're dealing with rubble here. Have you ever seen pictures of Berlin at the end of the World War II? I don't know how they rebuilt that. It would have been quite the challenge. I imagine they saw a lot of rubble, just like these Jews did. Loss of strength, loss of vision. This is rubbish. It's rubble. Loss of confidence. We're not able. At first, let us rise and build becomes we are not able all of a sudden. Loss of security. Intimidation was taking its toll. We've got enemies out there. There's war talk. How did Nehemiah deal with this? 13 and 14, chapter 4. You have Nehemiah responding. So in the lower parts of the space behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. So you fight for your families and remember the Lord. We'll be okay. Sometimes you just need someone to say the obvious. We just need to keep on working, and we need to keep on depending upon God. And this will work out in the end. Yes, it's hard work, but we're going to do this. And then the military opposition became more intense. Chapter 4, verse 8, they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and cause confusion in it. That was part of the reason for discouragement. And it temporarily demoralized the Jews. But measures were taken to counteract that threat, to be ready to build and fight at the same time. Verses 15 through 18. When our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. From that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, half held the spears, shields, bows, coats of mail. And the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon with the other. And each of the builders had his sword strapped at his side while he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. I said to the nobles, to the officials, to the rest of the people, the work is great, widely spread. We are separated on the wall, far from one another. In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us. Our God will fight for us. They kept working, they kept building. The work continued on. The motley crew was turned into half construction workers and half soldiers, but no opposition was going to stop this. But then money problems set in. Chapter 5, 1 through 5. Now there was a great outcry of the people and of their wives against the Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, with our sons and our daughters, we are many, so let us get grain that we may eat and keep alive. There were also those who said, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses to get grain because of the famine. And there were those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers, our children are as their children. Yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved. But it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards. So you have financial inequities, all the while that this project is going on. And the reasons behind the problem, you have famine, you have too many taxes, you have high interest rates. There's nothing new under the sun, is there? And Nehemiah is infuriated. And he takes it to the holders of the notes. In verses 6 through 10, we're about out of time, so I'm just going. These notes are going to be canceled. What you're doing is against the law of Moses. And he said it openly and publicly, and those who held the notes had to release the debts. It was wrong for them to charge interest. It was wrong for them to engage in debt slavery of their own people. The rich were getting richer, the poor were getting poorer, and this was wrong. And Nehemiah forced their hand. I wish there were more world leaders who stood up for the little guy. Nehemiah did. And if all of that is not enough, you have finally some intimidation. Some pressure tactics from Sanballat and Tobiah, Geshem the Arab. They turn up the heat one more time. And they're determined to meet privately with Nehemiah. They use pressure tactics. They use deceit in chapter 6. He senses trouble. He would not accommodate their request. No, I'm not going to meet with you. I have no reason to meet with you. Then there is a rumor through an open letter designed to hurt. It's greatly exaggerated, designed to hurt. Nehemiah's reply is, this is not true. He committed his plans to God, his fate to God. And then there's a false prophecy in the middle of chapter 6, basically saying that we need to meet together in the temple and you need to run for your life. And Nehemiah basically responds to that by saying in verse 11, should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not do it. He was not deterred and undaunted. So the end result, chapter 6, 15 and 16. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul in 52 days. And when all of our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. The wall was completed in record time, 52 days, in spite of all odds, because God was behind it. Today, we do not build a city's walls, but the Lord's cause. We support that greatest of all causes. We support the local church. And even today, there will be naysayers, there will be discouragement, criticism, internal apathy, money problems, outright opposition of those who are against us. That's okay. As Warren Wiersbe says, the bumps are what you climb on. Adversity turned into opportunity. Setbacks turned into stepping stones. And our response to the naysayers should be unified and clear. We will not be deterred. Nothing will stop us. Our God will fight for us. Let us rise up and build. You're subject to the invitation call of Christ. You need to come into a relationship with the Lord so that you can begin working for Him in the time and opportunity that you have left in this life. If you've never been baptized, do it. If you need to make what's wrong in your life right, do it. You can do it privately, do it privately. If you need to do it publicly, we're here to help you in any way that we can. But make things right with God and begin building the walls of His heavenly kingdom. Let's stand and sing a song of encouragement.